Truly God's mercies are unending. Listen carefully with your hearts prepared. I was born into a respected family in Jordan, and from a young age my path was clear. I studied hard, learned many languages, and understood how power works. By the time I became a high-profile royal advisor in the palace, many people feared my words. Kings listened when I spoke. Ministers waited for my approval. I walked through long marble halls with guards bowing their heads, and I believed this honor came from my own wisdom. I was a devoted Muslim by culture and tradition, but my heart had grown cold toward anything spiritual. I prayed when expected, fasted when required, and spoke religious words when cameras were near. Yet inside I trusted only my mind. I believed religion was useful for controlling people, not for knowing God. This made me proud, and pride slowly shaped my thoughts. In the palace, I often met Christian diplomats and foreign advisors. Some spoke gently about Jesus, not loudly, not with force. I laughed at them in private. I mocked the idea that God could come close to humans. I said such beliefs were for weak minds. When others praised Jesus, I smiled on the outside but insulted him in my thoughts. Sometimes I even joked late at night, saying that nothing would ever happen if I challenged this Jesus people talked about. My position gave me confidence that crossed into arrogance. I believed no power could touch me. I had wealth, security, influence, and respect. I had never slept hungry. I had never feared tomorrow. So I believed I did not need God, and I certainly did not need Jesus. But there was something I did not admit. At midnight, when the palace became quiet and the call to prayer faded into memory, I felt empty. My mind raced, but my soul felt dry. I ignored this feeling and buried it under work, meetings, and praise from others. I told myself that strong men do not question their lives. One night, after a long meeting about national matters, I returned to my private chamber. I was tired but restless. That night, my pride reached its peak, and my mockery went further than it ever had before. I did not know that this midnight would divide my life into before and after. That night, the palace was unusually silent. Even the guards outside my chamber stood farther than normal, giving me privacy. I washed my face, removed my royal robe, and sat alone under a dim lamp. My mind replayed the day's events, and I felt proud of how I had spoken in the council. Everyone had agreed with me. No one challenged my ideas. That pride made my heart careless. Near midnight, I began thinking about a conversation I once had with a Christian visitor. He had spoken calmly about forgiveness, about love that reaches enemies, about Jesus caring for the broken. I remembered laughing after he left. That memory returned, and this time I spoke out loud. I mocked Jesus openly, using words I had never dared to say before. I said he was weak. I said he was powerless. I said nothing would happen if I insulted him. I did not know that unseen attention was already focused on me. After speaking, I laughed softly and lay on my bed. The lamp flickered, but I ignored it. I believed the night would pass like every other night. But my heart began to beat faster for no clear reason. My room felt heavier, as if the air had thickened. I tried to calm myself by breathing slowly, but it did not help. Then I sensed that I was no longer alone. I did not see anyone at first, yet fear entered my chest. This fear was not like fear of enemies or political danger. It was deeper. It touched my thoughts. I wanted to move, but my body felt weak. My mouth became dry, and my confident mind suddenly felt small. I told myself this was stress, nothing more. I closed my eyes, but when I opened them again, the darkness in the room felt different. It was not just absence of light. It felt aware. My heart pounded harder. I remembered every mocking word I had spoken, and regret came suddenly, without warning. In that moment, I realized something important. I had mocked without understanding. I had spoken against what I did not know. The power I trusted could not protect me from what I was feeling. Titles, guards, and influence meant nothing in that room. Then something happened that broke my pride completely. I became aware that my life, my past, and my hidden thoughts were being known. Not judged loudly, not shouted at, but known fully. This awareness pressed on me like a weight, and I felt exposed. I wanted to pray, But I did not know what to say. The prayers I memorized felt empty. My confidence collapsed, and for the first time in many years, I felt like a child in the dark. This midnight was no longer ordinary. Something had begun, and I could not stop it. As the minutes passed, my control faded more and more. I tried to sit up, but my body felt heavy, like it did not fully belong to me anymore. My hands trembled, and my thoughts became loud and confused. I had advised rulers during crises, yet now I could not calm my own heart. The fear I felt was not violent, but it was firm. It did not rush. It stayed. It surrounded me quietly. I understood that whatever was happening was not a dream. I pinched my arm and I felt pain. I stood up slowly and walked across the room, but the feeling followed me. I was fully awake. I looked at the walls of my chamber. They were covered with fine designs and royal symbols. These things had always made me feel important. That night they felt small. I realized that everything I trusted could disappear in a moment. My knowledge felt shallow. My achievements felt temporary. Then my thoughts began to change without my effort. Scenes from my past came into my mind. Not the public moments, but the private ones. Times I lied. Times I used my position to harm others quietly. Times I pretended to be righteous while thinking evil thoughts. These memories came one after another, clearly, without confusion. I wanted them to stop, but they did not. I understood that I was seeing myself truthfully for the first time. Not as a royal advisor. Not as a respected man. But as a human being with pride, cruelty, and hidden darkness. I felt ashamed. Then I sensed a clear difference between the darkness I carried inside and the presence that was making me aware of it. The presence did not mock me like I had mocked. It did not insult me. It did not push me away. It allowed me to see myself honestly, and that honesty hurt. I remembered the name of Jesus again, but this time without laughter. I remembered how people said he came for sinners, not for the proud. That thought pierced me deeply. I realized that my mocking words had come from fear, not strength. I mocked because I did not want to surrender control. Tears filled my eyes, and I did not understand why. I had not cried since childhood. Yet there I was, standing alone in a palace, crying like a boy who had been caught in a lie. I whispered inside my heart, not boldly, not confidently, but weakly. I admitted that I did not know God the way I claimed. I admitted that my heart was empty. I admitted that I was afraid. That was when the fear began to change. It did not leave, but it softened. It became something else. Something that felt like authority mixed with patience. I sensed that a choice was being placed before me. Not forced. Not threatened. Just placed. And I knew my answer would change everything. I stood still as my thoughts slowed down. The room did not change, but something inside me did. For the first time in my life, I was not trying to control what was happening. I was not planning my next words. I was not protecting my image. I simply stopped resisting. In that quiet moment, I became aware that Jesus was not who I had described in my mockery. He was not weak. He was not distant. He was not confused. He revealed to me that he had always seen me clearly, even when I pretended to be righteous. He let me know that my position in the palace meant nothing compared to the condition of my heart. I understood that he was not responding to my insults with anger. Instead, he was answering my ignorance with truth. This realization broke me deeply. I had mocked someone who did not need to defend himself. I had challenged a power that chose patience instead of destruction. My knees weakened and I sat on the floor. I did not collapse from fear, but from understanding. I saw that my life had been built on pride and self-trust. I believed I was guiding others, but I myself was lost. This truth hurt, but it also felt clean, like light entering a dark room. He showed me that my religion had been a shield for my ego, not a bridge to God. I followed rules, but I did not know love. I spoke holy words, but my heart was dry. He let me know that God desired my heart more than my performance. I felt something I had never felt before. Peace mixed with sorrow. Sorrow for who I had been, and peace for who I was being invited to become. There was no loud voice, no visible form, yet the reality was stronger than anything I had experienced in the physical world. I admitted inside myself that I needed forgiveness. Not from people, not from institutions, but from God. I accepted that Jesus was the way I had rejected for so long. I did not understand everything, but I understood enough to say yes. That yes did not come from my mouth. It came from deep inside me. And the moment it formed, the heavy weight I had carried for years began to lift. I was still in the palace. I was still a royal advisor. But I was no longer the same man. After that surrender, the room felt lighter. The fear that once pressed on my chest slowly faded. My breathing became calm. My thoughts were no longer racing. I remained seated on the floor for a long time, not because I was weak, but because I did not want to move too quickly from that moment. I became aware of something new inside me. It was not excitement. It was not pride. It was a quiet assurance that I was no longer alone. He let me know that I had been forgiven, not because I deserved it, but because mercy was given freely. This understanding brought deep relief to my heart. I looked around my chamber again. Nothing had physically changed. The lamp still burned softly. The walls were the same. But I was different. The palace that once made me feel powerful now reminded me of how small humans are without God. I realized that I had spent my life advising kings while ignoring the king above all. This thought did not shame me. It corrected me. I felt a desire to live truthfully for the first time. Not to impress. Not to control. But to obey. As the night moved toward morning, I knelt and bowed my head. I did not use memorized words. I simply opened my heart. I told God that I was ready to learn. I told him I was willing to change, even if it cost me my position. This decision felt serious, but it also felt right. When dawn approached, I stood up slowly. My body felt rested even though I had not slept. I washed my face and looked at myself in the mirror. The man looking back at me was the same on the outside, but his eyes carried humility I had never seen before. I knew that my life could not return to how it was before. This was not an emotional moment that would fade with time. It was a turning point. I understood that the real test would begin when the sun rose and my daily duties resumed. That morning, I walked out of my chamber aware that God had begun a work in me that would challenge everything I thought I knew. When the sun rose, the palace returned to life. Servants moved quickly. Guards changed shifts. Advisors gathered for meetings. Everything looked the same, yet nothing felt the same to me. I walked through the halls with a new awareness, as if my eyes had been opened to a world I had ignored. Inside my heart, I carried a secret. I had accepted Jesus, but I lived in a place where such faith was not welcome. I understood the danger. One wrong word could end my career. One mistake could cost me my freedom. Yet the peace I felt was stronger than my fear. During meetings, I spoke less. I listened more. I noticed how often pride guided decisions. I saw how power can blind even wise men. Before, I was part of that blindness. Now, I felt called to be different even if no one knew why. At night, I began to pray quietly. Not loudly. Not publicly. I asked God to guide my steps. I asked for wisdom to act with love, not arrogance. I asked for courage to remain faithful in silence. He let me know that faith does not always begin with loud confession, but with obedience in small choices. I also noticed a change in how I treated people. Servants who once felt invisible now mattered to me. Guards who stood for hours gained my respect. I understood that Jesus cared for all, not just the powerful. This understanding reshaped my behavior more than any law ever had. The struggle was real. Some days fear returned. Some nights I questioned how long I could hide my faith. But each time fear came, I remembered that midnight. I remembered how pride failed me and how mercy saved me. I began reading secretly, learning about Jesus in quiet moments. His life challenged me. His humility humbled me. His love corrected me. I was growing not quickly but deeply. I knew this journey would cost me something. But I also knew I could never return to mocking truth again. The test came sooner than I expected. One afternoon, an urgent matter was brought before the council. A Christian community within the kingdom was accused of disloyalty. Some advisors demanded harsh action. I had supported such decisions in the past without hesitation. This time, my heart reacted differently. As voices rose in the room, I felt pressure building inside me. I knew what was expected of me. I knew what answer would please the leaders. But I also knew what was right. For the first time, my loyalty was divided between my position and my conscience. When it was my turn to speak, my voice felt heavy. I chose my words carefully. I did not defend Christianity openly. I did not preach. But I spoke of justice, of truth, and of judging actions instead of beliefs. I urged patience. I advised investigation instead of punishment. The room became quiet. Some looked surprised. Others looked suspicious. I sensed that something had shifted. I had crossed a line, even though my words were careful. After the meeting, a senior official warned me privately to be cautious. He reminded me of what I could lose. That night, fear returned. I understood that following Jesus was not just an inner change. It would affect my choices. I prayed quietly and asked for strength. He let me know that obedience often brings risk, but also brings peace. From that day, I faced subtle resistance. Invitations slowed. My influence weakened. Yet something inside me remained steady. I realized that my identity was no longer tied to approval. I belonged to God, even if no one else knew. This test taught me that faith is proven not in comfort, but in pressure. After that council meeting, my life slowly began to change. Not suddenly, not loudly, but steadily. I was still allowed inside the palace, but I was no longer invited into every discussion. Decisions were made without me. Smiles became careful. Conversations ended when I entered the room. At first, this hurt deeply. I had spent many years building my reputation. Now I watched it fade without explanation. I wanted to defend myself, but I felt guided to remain calm. I remembered that Jesus himself was misunderstood and rejected. This thought did not make the pain disappear, but it helped me endure it. I experienced isolation for the first time in my adult life. People who once praised me avoided me. Some treated me as if I had become dangerous. Nights became quiet again, but this time the quiet was not empty. I prayed. I read. I reflected. I grew. There were moments when I doubted myself. I wondered if I should have stayed silent. I questioned whether my faith was worth the cost. But each time doubt came, I felt reminded of that midnight. I knew the truth I had encountered was real. I could not deny it, even if it cost me everything. One evening, alone in my chamber, I felt deeply discouraged. I asked God if he still saw me. He let me know that he was closer than ever. I understood that approval from people had been replaced by peace from God. This peace was quiet, but strong. I began to understand something important. Loss can be a teacher. Silence can shape the soul. Isolation can prepare the heart. I was no longer living to impress. I was learning to live to obey. Even as doors closed, I felt guided. Even as my influence decreased, my faith increased. I knew I was being shaped for a purpose beyond titles. There came a time when silence was no longer possible. A foreign delegation visited the palace, and among them were Christian leaders. I was assigned to be present because of my experience with international matters. I knew this meeting would test me again, but I did not know how deeply. During the discussion, one of the visitors spoke about peace, forgiveness, and loving enemies. As he spoke, I felt my heart respond strongly. These were not just ideas to me anymore. They were truths that had changed my life. I listened carefully, and without planning to, I nodded in agreement. Someone noticed. Later that day, I was questioned privately. I was asked why my behavior had changed. Why my decisions were different. Why my loyalty seemed unclear. In that moment I felt fear, but I also felt calm. I knew I could not lie anymore. I did not explain everything. I did not argue. But I let it be known that my conscience was guided by faith in Jesus. The reaction was immediate. Disbelief. Anger. I was warned again. This time more strongly. I was told to reconsider. I was reminded of my past service and the comfort of my life. I was given time to think. That night, I prayed deeply. I understood the cost clearly now. If I continued, I could lose everything. But I also knew that turning back would mean losing my soul. He let me know that true life is not measured by safety, but by faithfulness. I chose not to deny what had saved me. The next weeks were difficult. My role was reduced officially. My access was limited. I was no longer trusted. Yet inside I felt free. For the first time, my outer life matched my inner truth. This was the price of following Jesus, and I accepted it. Today, when I look back at my life, I see two versions of myself. One who mocked what he did not understand, and one who was shown mercy when he deserved none. I share this not to make myself look strong, but to show how patient and loving God is toward those who are lost. Following Jesus did not make my life easier in the way people often expect. I lost honor, position, and comfort, but I gained truth, peace, and a new heart. I learned that real strength is not found in power or titles, but in humility and obedience. I learned that God cares more about who we are becoming than what we appear to be. To every believer reading this, I want to say something simple. Take your Christian journey seriously, but do not make it heavy. Walk with God daily. Pray even when words feel small. Study God's word even when you do not understand everything at once. Growth takes time. Faith grows step by step. Love one another. This is not a weak command. It is a strong one. Love protects your heart from pride. Love keeps your faith clean. Love helps others see Jesus without you forcing words on them. I learned that people watch our actions more than they hear our speeches. Do not mock what you do not understand, and do not fear those who mock you. I once stood on the wrong side of truth, yet God waited for me. That same patience is available to others. Pray for them. Be kind to them. Trust God to work in His time. If you are young, know this. God can speak to your heart at any age. You do not need power, education, or status to belong to Him. You only need a willing heart. And if you are older, know this. It is never too late to turn back, to repent, and to begin again. I was a man of influence who mocked Jesus at midnight. Yet that same midnight became the doorway to my salvation. God can use your darkest moment to bring His greatest light. Stay faithful. Stay humble. Stay loving. And never stop seeking God with an honest heart.